Hey, thank you. We're back for another panel. Our last one was fabulous, I thought. What you think about it, MJ?
Man, I thought it was amazing. It was just spiritually lifting to see, the level of just discernment and energy and intellect, between that last panel. It was absolutely amazing.
I know for a lot of viewers, this is going to be a panel a lot of people are going to hear and see, especially what's going on right now with Mr. Floyd being murdered in Minneapolis. This panel I'm super excited about because sometimes when people talk about civil rights and criminal justice reform, they're talking from they're not actually experiencing, actually doing the work to try and make it, to change it. And everyone on this panel right now is actually doing the work to change it. And I'm just so humbled that they said yes to be on this. So first, let me bring in Pastor Honorable Everett Mitchell. Sir, how are you?
I'm good, man. So glad to be here, man. Really excited about this conversation and just to be able to see everybody, man, and just be a part of the lights that's trying to shine in this community to give people hope that we're going to make this, finish the work that we started and get this done.
Yeah. You growing out a beard on your face? Is that what I see?
But I have no choice. This is I have no choice, man.
That's good, man.
Showing my age, man. Showing my age now.
And Mr. Heal the Hood himself, my man in Milwaukee, Mr. Ajamou Butler. How are you doing, sir?
What's happening, family? I'm overall on my right today. It's a little rougher than it has been for me, but I'm gonna continue to push through. In a moment of transparency, I can say that I'm not okay today, but I will be okay.
Amen.
Yeah, amen.
And Miss Jacquelyn Hunt, who is a mother of the community, who lives side by side of people who are actually out here in the community doing this work. Miss Jacquelyn Hunt, how are you doing? Wonderful. Miss Beautiful Jacquelyn Hunt.
Hello, everyone. I am doing fairly well these days. There's a lot going on out there. And as you know, I take on a lot being a mother and a community auntie to so many here. So my heart is a little heavy, and but my hopes and my heart are also in good spirits. I believe that, we are really on the verge of change.
Amen. And I just want to know, we are still expecting M. Adams. She's having some difficulties getting in, but we are expecting M. Adams also to join us from Freedom Inc. But until then, I want to introduce our friend, Mr. Noble Wray, who used to be the police chief here in Madison. He also was the Urban League CEO and president for a while, also doing a lot of stuff nationwide of criminal justice reform. Mr. Noble Wray, sir, how are you? Did we lose Noble?
There you go.
You're muted. You're mute, Noble.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hear you now.
All right. Really glad to be here. It has been an emotional 3 months, actually, following the pandemic, on the heels of the tragedy. It's just been a tragedy. But as always, I'm optimistic and hopeful that some positive change will come out of this. But I appreciate the invitation and look forward to the questions.
So, Jackie, we want to start with you and thank you to this amazing panel. We have a great deal of respect for the work that each of you do. I remember 2 weeks ago we had a discussion with African American, where we had two African American males, Pastor Allen, and we had Anthony Cooper, and we brought on all the police chiefs. And at the last minute, we brought on Jacquelyn Hunt. And then Jacquelyn Hunt, your words were amazing. It was encouraging. In fact, one person said, Jacquelyn Hunt said more in 1 minute than everybody else said in the entire 90 minutes of our program. So, Ms. Hunt, we're going to start with you and ask you to kick this program off. As a Black mother who is well respected in our neighborhood, that work in the trenches in our neighborhoods, tell us what you are hearing from our community and what the rest of the world should be listening, and especially our white allies right now.
Okay. So what I am seeing and experiencing in our community is a lot of anger. People are tired. They have been wrestling with and been exposed to so much that their souls are now just weary, and people are crying out. They're doing it in a lot of different ways. They're doing it through protests. They're doing it through the looting. They're doing it through the rioting. Some are doing it quietly in their homes. Some are abusing substances more and needing more mental health and emotional support. But there's just this real unrest out there. And people have just grown weary. Their souls are so tired, they don't know what else to do. So to do something, and I include myself in that as well, even though I'm not out every day with the demonstrations and the protests. That's because my soul is weary. I have so many inbox messages from people just asking and dumping, just kind of dumping on me. And I just listen, And so people in our community are really hurting, and they're really, really, really tired of hearing more and more of the same old rhetoric, the language, the jargon that kind of just goes around, but it really doesn't say or do anything, right? It's just a lot of hot air, a lot of talk, and they won't change now for real. And being exposed to what they've been exposed to lately here with the racist acts, these last three in particular, Ahmaud, Floyd, and the baby's whose birthday today. Her name is escaped. Brianna, yeah. That was enough. Like those things happened in less than 30 days. It wasn't even a good month. No one can mourn anything or any loss in 30 days, and to have three blatant, real acts of just out and out racism smack and take the lives out of people has just brought us to a place where now what else we got to lose? That's where people are. What was the second part of that question? And why the disconnect? Because first of all, we live in a special place. Y'all know what Madison, Wisconsin represents as far as Black people are concerned. And so other parts, even of the world, or not even, maybe even just racially, a disconnect. Because no one walks in our shoes. No one has the experiences that we have, particularly living here in Dane County and in Madison, Wisconsin, and what that means to be Black. So,
no doubt.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jackie. So we now got M. Adams from Freedom Inc., the co-executive director, joining us. M, thanks for coming in. All right. So now we're going to so the question, Chief Wray, you want to take that on?
Oh, sure. I'll deal with this, not only from a Madison perspective, but a national perspective, given, I'm looking at what's taking place and travel across the United States quite a bit. First of all, I think what I'm hearing from the community and what I'm pulling out of nationally and locally is since the just horrible incident, the murder of George Floyd, is that I think people are asking that when these incidents occur, things like this occur, misconduct like this occurs involving police misconduct, that we move a lot faster, that we don't get caught up in the bureaucracy of, internal procedures, processes, and things like that, that people want action and they want it a lot faster, that it's justice should be swift. This is an issue of justice and it should be swift, and it's not. And I think that has led to some of the frustration. What I'm also hearing is a sense that, and it's very clear, that when police officers are involved in misconduct and citizens are involved in similar misconduct, that they want police officers treated the same way as citizens are treated.
Yep.
And they want them treated, and they want that the speed and the criminal justice system to deal with them in the same manner. And I think that is very, very loud and clear. The third thing I'm hearing from the community and across the United States, and this is more of a broader issue, that this is not a protest. People have been referring to this as a protest. It's not a protest. This is a movement. I'm probably the oldest one on this panel, and I lived through the 60s, and it has that feel. And two things that jump out at me that represents that feel, that this is not a protest. This is bigger than that. This is worldwide. One is that the people that are asking for change, it is beyond the people that are asking for change. It is broad-based. I mean, I saw a poll that 74%, this is an ABC poll, 74% believe that the problems related to the criminal justice system is deeper than what we're seeing. That's 74% of Americans. That's hard to get 74% of Americans to agree on anything. And then finally, the reason why I think this is not just a protest, it's a movement. When you start to see a fundamental shift in the way that people think about a particular issue. And we're starting to see that. People are seeing a fundamental shift. And I go back to the ABC poll. I go back to the fact that people want faster action. And I go back to this idea that people want police officers to be treated the same way as any other American, and in particular African Americans, are treated with similar conduct. And the disconnect here, I think, is we still, from a criminal justice standpoint, we still at times tend to hide behind due process, policies, procedures, and the law. And that is creating a sense of frustration when there is misconduct. And I think those things, when we talk about criminal justice reform, I don't think it's reform, I think it's constant improvement. But when we talk about criminal justice reform, those are the issues that we really do need to wrestle with. So
thanks, Chief Wray. Yeah, great points. Ajamou, tell us what's going on in Milwaukee and what you're hearing there. I still messed it up.
I'm shaking my head at the climax of the time we in right now, dear brother. It's ugly right now. I can't lie to you. It's a beautiful ugly, if that makes any sense. On one hand, it is beautiful to see the civil unrest, and it's beautiful to see the protests and everything like that. But even that comes with so many different downsides. On one hand, it's a disruption to the hood. You know what I'm saying? On one hand, I hate that we even got to get out here and protest. You know what I'm saying? Things like this, man. We've been seeing our frontline activists, man, getting towed up by the police. Getting towed up. I'm talking about brothers who put their life on the line to protest, to lead these marches, to make sure that things is going safely. They getting towed up by the police. I'm talking about one of our good brothers, Frank Nitty. Shout out to the homie. He got arrested the other night. He got cut up real bad. He had a scuffle with the police. The good brother Khalil Coleman, he got pepper sprayed in the face and whatnot. It's some white supremacists even put a hit out on one of our leaders here, man. Brother Frank Nitty, real stuff too. Not even just no false flag and nobody just jacking and macking. So, you know, it's a grim reminder that when black men stand up and take a stance for their community, you always gonna have some real opposition. And when you become a leader in this type of movement, and when you engage in this type of war that we engaging in, you got to come to the actualization that you may not make it home some nights. You know what I'm saying? You got to come to the realization that your family, you know, they got to have an understanding that you out here in these trenches. And if you're going to put your life on the line for it, your family got to understand that too. So it's been a lot of emotions here in the city. Unfortunately, we might see a little bit more division than we do see unification, because the church divided with the movement people divided with the black politicians. The black politicians is divided with the, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's just like, damn, y'all, can't we just figure out a way to centralize all our ideologies and just fight for what we, you know, consider to be righteous, if you will? So I don't know, the climate in Milwaukee, I love this protesting. They ain't letting up on this, they tearing stuff up with this protesting. You know what I mean? They really disrupting the flow of your normal routine. And I can appreciate that, man. So, you know, as far as, like I said, the climate here in Milwaukee is tense. It's real tense right now, and it should be tense. It need to get even more tense. It need to get even more hectic. Things probably don't get worse in here in my city before they get better. And that's the honest to God truth. And I don't even know what better looks like or when better looks like or none of that. But, you know, we're going to stay on these front lines. We're going to stay pushing this movement, though. I can promise you that much.
No doubt, no doubt. Man, that's real talk. So, M. Adams, you've been leading this movement here in Madison. We would love to hear your perspective. And then Everett, once M finishes, we'll love to hear your perspective right after she finishes.
Thank you. I would say that what feels really clear to me from people at this time is that people want something radically different than what was before. So I think that people are not interested into returning to policing from 10 years ago or whatever. People are saying that even 10 years ago it was bad, and before that it was bad, and before that it was bad. And so what I hear people saying is that we no longer want to use policing or prisons to solve our social issues, that instead we want to build up life, let me say this, pro-Black, pro-woman, pro-men and boys, pro-women and girls, pro-men and boys, pro-LGBTQ, pro-Black, life-affirming institutions to deal with our issues inside of our communities. And so when I am out there, I am hearing people say, yes, I am here for George Floyd, but I was also here 10 years ago for Aiyana Jones, who was a 7-year-old Black girl who got shot in the head while she was asleep on her grandmother's couch when the police busted into the wrong apartment, similar to Breonna Taylor, who we fight for today, whose birthday is today. And so that is what I am hearing. And I think if people want to understand what is happening in the streets, people have to understand that people are saying no more to what we currently have. No more to police, no more trying to approach police violence and answering that with training or Black cops or LGBT cops or mental health cops. People are saying that does not work. We have shown billions of dollars have proven that that doesn't work. The evidence is there. The studies are there. That does not work. And that is what I'm hearing both in Madison and also all around the country, where I am supporting people in movement and also supporting people in rebellion.
Awesome. Judge Mitchell, thank you, Em.
Yeah, I mean, I echo the King as she was talking about the essence of what that means for us. I think my people are here, they're angry and they're tired. I think the disappointment that there is in the fact that we did not finish doing exactly what we said we were going to do. And we tried to replace a sense of radical change with a belief in that people will, abide by these ideas of training or diversity. And they keep mimicking these notions that those things will, radically shift the change. When we sat down and tried to have these conversations with law enforcement officers in 2015, and we tried to have conversations with Tony Robertson. I remember going into those meetings with, Young, Gifted, and Black, and sitting in there being disrespected by, Paul Soglin, and being disrespected by Mike Koval, and having to call Noble Wray, and it's like, man, why are they talking to us like that? Why are they disrespecting M and Brandy and Z? Why are they talking to them like that? We're trying to, put forth an agenda that reflects the community's desire for systemic and, albeit change to, root out white supremacy in the police and how we deal with criminal justice reform. And they just were just being disrespectful and dismissive to the degree in which they would threaten us, with our positions. I'll never forget how Paul Soglin sought to try to get me fired from, the University of Wisconsin, and my job as director of community relations because of my association with Young, Gifted, and Black. And I told them then, I'm like, no, we're gonna keep pushing. And I think this era is the culmination of the continued struggle and fight that people have been sowing seeds this entire time. Negroes went to sleep. Negroes are feeling good watching football games and basketball games and being entertained by comedy shows. And so now this COVID has stopped everything to say, no more distractions this time. This time is different because there are no distractions that can keep your mind entertained and keeping y'all jumping around, being some kind of character of yourself. No, people are waking up. And I love my quote by Ralph Ellison. This is one of my favorite quotes. He says, there are few things in the world as dangerous as sleepwalkers. What you're seeing right now is people waking up from that sleep. And now we're in a situation where nobody is ready. Nobody's going to sleep. Everybody's woke. Everybody's staying woke. Everybody want to be woke. And we waking up everybody. And we're going to keep everybody woke until change that we want to see, happens in this space. And that's what our white allies need to understand is, I guess somebody trying to FaceTime me. That's what our white allies need to understand is that there is no rest. There is no rest. Those who believe in freedom can't rest. I can't sleep at night. I can't have peace of mind. And as we'll talk about later, with about reform, as somebody who's sitting in this seat all the time, looking at the lives, I promise you, whatever we think we are creating, if we don't radically reshift it to do exactly as M said, to put a pro-black ingrained into the policies that we're trying to protect, we're gonna be redoing this over and over again like we've done the last 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah. So what does peace look like to you now in the community, and then what does justice look like, right? Because I think those are big words, but what does that really look like? Let's start with Ajamou. Let's just start with Ajamou on that one.
What does justice look like? What does peace
look like in our community, right? What does that look like?
I ain't gonna lie, big brother. I don't like to come from a more pessimistic standpoint of view, but right now it's hard for me to understand what peace is as a black man growing up in the ghettos of America. It's hard to understand peace because we got a mental peace that we got to deal with, mental health peace. And, you know what I'm saying, just simply being able to wake up every morning and not deal with the trauma like, damn, I hope I don't see somebody on the news who look just like me get killed again by somebody who look just like me, or somebody who look just like me get killed again by somebody that's in the blue. So there's a peace of mind that I think is lacking in the community. I think the racial tensions, you know what I'm saying, amongst communities of color is so intense. So when you talk about peace, like I don't really necessarily know what that looks like. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that'll ever be a thing, because one thing I do know, just racism and white supremacy, it rears its ugly head, man. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to continue to face these issues. We're going to continue. Like, I don't know what the solution is. And I hate that that's my answer per se, but it's just my truth as a black man. Justice, man, it's traumatizing. I do a lot of trauma-informed care work. Okay, I do a lot of healing work. I do a lot of soul restoration work here in the city. And it is so traumatizing to little black boys and girls to see every day on the 6 o'clock news, a police officer killed another black man, police officer killed another black woman, so on and so forth. They carry that trauma with them into adulthood. And because that trauma goes unaddressed, they now act out in certain ways. You know what I'm saying? It's hard for them to form healthy relationships and healthy habits because they have so much mental, emotional, and spiritual trauma from childhood that was never addressed into adulthood. So justice for me, I would love to say every time we see somebody in the blue take a last breath from a person of color, a person of non-color, I would love to see them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I would love to see, you get these scenarios where police is kicking in doors and they got the wrong household, but, somebody kicking my door at 3 a.m, I shoot at them because I don't know what's going on. I hit them, but I'm in the wrong. That's crazy talk. So when you use that term justice and peace, and we use that in the chants, no justice, no peace, like what really do that mean? What really does peace mean? Malcolm X said, put the word freedom out your mouth if you ain't ready to die for that thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, who of us is really ready to die to say, I want to sustain and live in a more peaceful environment for my black son's sake, for my black niece's sake, for my black family's sake, and I'm willing to put my life on the line to receive that justice or to receive that peace. A lot of time I feel like the battle I'm fighting, I'm not going to see the results in my lifetime and maybe not even my son's lifetime. So justice to me is not eradicating or ending racism. I don't know that we got the tools and the tactics for that, not at this moment at least. But justice for me is to remind my little black boy that he is not a threat. No matter how the outside world may perceive him, peace to me is teaching my son and coaching my son through these tumultuous, troubled times to let him know that, son, you're not a threat. Son, you're not nobody's enemy. You know what I'm saying? Son, you can walk in this world as a free young man. You can walk in this world as a bold and brave young man with your head up and not have to operate in fear. That's justice to me. I can't speak for it on a communal or a global level because it's things that's out of my control. But I've always been one to try to operate to change what I can change. And if that means I can change my students, we doing a graduation tomorrow. I say this at the end of my commentary. Our graduation for my senior class, and we one of the only high schools in the city that's going to do it like a physical graduation. Of course, social distancing, and it's a different type of graduation format. But justice for me is to remind my little black boys and girls that despite all, they can. overcome. Despite all, they will rise above it. Despite all, they can fight poverty, they can fight depression, they can fight trauma, they can fight drama. So justice for me is starting to look a little bit different. When I was young in this movement, when I started Heal the Hood, 9 years ago, I could have told you I was ready to end starvation in Somalia. Okay, I'm finna end this over here in China. I'm finna fight oppression over here in South America. I was ready to change the world and the universe. You hear me? But now, as I've matured in the game, my perspective is a little bit different. And so I'll leave us with this. I may not be able to change the world, but I can change the world around me. I may not be able to change the world, but I can change the world around me. So I can't speak for what justice up in Minnesota look like, but I know right here in the streets of Milwaukee, we gonna get our justice. And if we got to keep tearing shit up, if we got to keep disturbing the peace, if we got to keep protesting, I'm out here every day if I can be. You know what I'm saying? Like I ain't on the front lines how some of these other brothers is, but I honor them brothers. I got them brothers backs and I got them brothers front. So I mean, just in short, and I keep saying I'll say this in the end, but for real, last commentary, a protest was going on the other night here in Milwaukee, and it was like 8 or 9, armed white militiamen. You see what I'm saying? They wasn't a part of our protest. Obviously, they weren't there to support us. It was clear that they was there for intimidation practices, and you know what I'm saying? But what would be justice, ideally, is for one of the 150, 200 police officers and National Guards that was out there to step to them and say, hey, I know you have a right to bear arms and you have a right to assemble and protest and voice your opinion, but right now ain't the time and place for that shit. We're going to ask y'all to move. Because y'all are inciting, y'all are sparking fear, y'all are sparking frustrations. You know what I'm saying? It's just not the time or place. So justice would be to say those who are in position of power can speak up and advocate for those of us who are not in positions of power. But that may not be a thing in modern day America. So, I'm going to leave it with saying I don't really know what peace and justice looks like, dear brother, unfortunately.
Yeah. Let me come you, M. Adams. How would you answer that question? You're muted, friend.
Okay.
There you go.
You would think at this point, hundreds of Zoom videos that I would have mastered the mute and unmute. So I think it is intellectually dishonest for us to try to discuss justice and peace under these conditions. There can be no peace because we live in a society where Black people are not even seen as people. We live in a society where the police have orders to protect concrete. If a homeless person, and this happened outside of our office, if a homeless person is urinating outside on the concrete, the police show up and they protect the concrete. They should protect the concrete by arresting that homeless person, giving a citation to that homeless person, and caging that homeless person because they have the value in the concrete. So to me, we can't even discuss peace and justice under these conditions. So when people come to me and try to ask me things like, well, don't you want peaceful streets? Well, what exactly are you saying? Are they rather saying to me, do I really want peace? Or are they really telling me they don't want victims to fight back? So what a lot of people don't know about me is I come into this work around policing from a person who does actually work around gender-based violence. So a lot of my work is actually around ending domestic violence, sexual violence, elder abuse, child molestation, etc. And we teach things to people who have been survivors of that. We teach them about they have the right to their bodies. They have the right to bodily autonomy. We teach them to advocate for themselves. You have the right for no one to control you. You have a self worthy of defense, right? You do not have to allow people to do those things. Policing in its very essence is a contradiction of that. Policing in its very essence is the antithesis of Black bodily autonomy. Because what policing does is say that we don't even have the right to have our bodies be defended. I remember watching that video of Janelle Laird and the justification of those police officers for why they punched her to the ground, tased her, and then hooded her is because she spit. As though a human body, forget who it is, as though a human body does not resist violence on it. If I am being tased, you're right, I spit, right? If I am being tased, you're right, I am not still, my body is jerking. But they could not see her as human. Right? They could not see her as human to say she as a human is responding to the violence on her. They instead saw her as a beast, as a non-human entity, as simply something that they sought to control. So to me, I don't even enter this conversation as though justice is possible in this context. So to me, the step toward justice is community control. The step toward justice is Black people having the power to determine safety. It's Black people being able to say, this is what we're going to invest in to create safety. This is what we're going to do to address harm in our system, in our community. And this is what we ain't even going to sweat, y'all. There's some things that we criminalize that shouldn't even go on. Why are we still locking up people for weed? Why? See, so some of it is like we're trying to get at the root of what is really at the root is that Black people, we are not even seen as people. And so I think systemically, structurally, we have to upend that to even begin a conversation of justice, because justice is not interpersonal. Justice ain't me getting along with one white woman. It is not. That is perhaps a friendship. That is perhaps a nice gesture, but that is not justice.
It's real talk. Real talk.
So let me come to you, Noble.
I'll just say that M. Adams, I love you. That's it.
Well, M has a big support. She has a big crew supporting her. What about you, Noble? What do you think?
I think a number of things. When I think of justice, I'm always struck by the symbolism of justice, and the biggest symbolism of justice is Lady Justice. And people will take that and they'll say, justice is blind. And they'll look at that and they'll say, justice is blind. That's the way I was brought up, saying justice is blind. Justice is not blind. Justice can see. Justice can see, and we see the results of justice seeing. But justice is not blind. Justice should be. And justice was intended to be blindfolded. And that's what justice is, blindfolded. And the reason why justice is blindfolded is the recognition that as human beings, we all have biases. And Judge Mitchell talked about that we should be woke. And the only way to be woke is that you're constantly woke. What's going to happen from this moment on, and what I fear that will happen from this moment on, is that we have a crisis. And we are intense, and we're looking at the crisis, and we're thinking about the crisis, and we're woke right now. But for justice to be real, we got to stay woke. And the reason why we have to stay woke is because we've got people that work in the system, not just police officers, because they deserve it. But we've got district attorneys, judges, part of the Department of Corrections. The whole system has a bias in it. And I think we need to recognize that. The other thing that I think is important, not only does justice need to be constant, but justice is co-produced. It's not just the justice system. You cannot have justice without having that voice of people and people engaged and involved and staying woke and staying part of it. The idea of protest is key. That's what we're seeing and hearing right now. The other thing I'd like to say in terms of talking about justice, but peace, which I think has created a whole lot of problems on this issue. And let me just expound on this. I think it was Martin Luther King talked about, the absence of tension is not justice. And so what we do many times is we're lulled in between the crisis to think that everything is okay. So when crime is down, we think everything is okay. If nobody's protesting, we think everything is okay, but it's not. There's still people being mistreated. There's still people being treated unjust. There's still misconduct. But what ends up happening is that we're lulled to think, because there's no tension, that there is justice. And we don't work on it. That's why I go back to, again, the comment is that justice has to be constant. It has to be co-produced. It is not blind, and we have to stay woke.
Thank you. And Ms. Hunt, how would you answer that question?
I agree with everything that's been said, but for me, I believe there is hope. And when I think about what peace might potentially look like, could potentially look like, and justice as well, I don't see that happening anytime soon. I look at my granddaughter, who is 5. And so I have children and grandchildren. I got kids across the lifespan. And then I got these grandbabies. So I hear there's things that go, conversations that I have with my 25-year-old, conversations I have with my 20-year-old, conversations I'm having with my 13-year-olds, my 10-year-olds, my 30-something-year-olds, and each of those conversations are same but different, right? But when I look at my grandbabies, the youngest one being just a year old, and how my 20-year-old and her peers are viewing the world and how they are moving in the world, my belief that this peace that we have, this ideal can exist, won't happen in anybody's lifetime that has lived through this. You know what I'm saying? Change, the peace and the justice is gonna come when my grandbaby, Jack, who's a year old, is in power, because their generations are, once us old people and our ideals and the history and the trauma that is so ingrained in us, and those racist white supremacists that are influencing, because kids now, like when you look at who's out there now, there are allies. So the ideals are changing. The world, even like race is changing now, because everything is so blended. It was blended before, but it wasn't recognized. But now it is. And I believe that the type of peace and justice that needs to embody a fair and just world won't be seen in our lifetimes. It won't come until my grandbabies are running this world, whatever we leave them of this world, because I believe we're destroying it anyway. But that's another question and another conversation. But, we're going to continue to fight. We're going to continue the movement to get towards it. Then we're going to die off. But this time, I believe that it will continue until we get to something sustainable, because these youngins today are smart. They are smart and they have a lot of access to information and they utilize it. Some to a fault. Some youth are so smart that they are smarter than their parents. And I don't mean that in a negative or derogatory way. I always tell my kids, yeah, you may be smarter than me. You can do all these things that I can do, but you'll never have my wisdom. And so it takes both. It takes their smart and intellect and their energy and their power. And it also is going to take wisdom that they get bestowed upon them from rational people and from people who have the experience to leave them a legacy of something that would resemble what peace and justice looks like. So that's just for me. I don't see it happening in my lifetime. I'm going to continue to do my part. I'm going to continue to hold my young people accountable and have those conversations. And I know that when they go into their influence, into their peer groups, that they are not just following. They have opinions and they can make a rational argument and challenge the thinking. I'm watching shifts in my own babies right now. And I claim a lot of community kids, a lot of community young adults, but I'm watching their shift, and they're teaching me to kind of lean in a little bit more myself, and to let go of some of my old habits and my old values and my beliefs, because nothing in this world looks the way it did when those values and beliefs were instilled in me. Now, there's still some hardcore truths and values: honesty, respect, integrity. I believe you don't just respect your elders. Yes, you have a right, but you also need to know what the limits are with that right, because they do come. You can't just say anything out your mouth to me. I tell these youngers all the time, I'm not Jackie. I'm Miss Jackie, Auntie Jackie. You can put any prefix on it you want, but you do not get to walk up to me and say Jackie. If you ain't 40, paying your own bills, got a job, and can sustain yourself. Other than that, you don't refer to me as Jackie. I'm Miss Jackie to you, or Auntie Jackie. You can choose. So
Right.
peace and justice, I don't see in my lifetime, and I'm sorry.
I just met that threshold, so I'm gonna stick with Miss Hunt.
But you got your own car, your own
yes, ma'am. But no, but I'm gonna stick out. You check me in real quick. I might have called you Jackie earlier, so let me get right. Let me get right.
Miss Jackie.
Yeah, Miss Jackie. Yeah, let me get right. What about you, brother Everett?
Well, I'm gonna call you Jackie because I got all those criteria met. But I will still say yes, ma'am. Let me say that peace for me is the definition of unrest. I think some people have idea of peace of tranquility and peace, but for me, it is the essence of unrest. I've never known peace. I've only known unrest. Because as long as I have seen injustice in different spaces, my soul can't rest while I see the injustices. So I don't know peace. I only know unrest. And it is the unrest that has always stayed at the forefront of my prophetic places in my mind. And, even as a judge, I'm still seeing that unrest. So when you think about justice, I think people think of justice as a noun when actually we should be thinking about justice as a verb. We think justice is a fixed state of being, when reality is justice is a process by which we are trying to create that which we want to see in the world. So if we want to see certain things, then we have to be involved in the process of risking our lives and at the same time being honest and truthful about the systems that exist while we dismantle them and recreate those things that must be created in order for humanity to exist the way it needs to. Black and brown bodies, I could tell you as a judge, are undervalued and mistreated all the damn time. And so when you think about what does it mean, right? I got a pro-Black sensibility. I'm not African American. I am pro-Black in my orientation of how I see the world. And because my Blackness affirms the Blackness of these children, I'm constantly making sure that I'm tweaking different ways in which we see and value these children. Man, I promise you, every day I'm watching children being moved around these systems and not being seen as a human being. And if I dare to raise the desire for them to see them as human beings, then I'm the bastard or I'm the one that's being criticized. Man, I had a group home right outside of Milwaukee. My young girls were being treated, they didn't like it. So they came to me as a judge and they said, Judge, I don't like it. I don't like how they treated me. And the group home, I questioned the group home. I'm like, why are y'all not giving these girls what they need? As King Adam said, why can't they respect how their bodies are being treated? Why can't they decide how they want to be treated and being held? And the group home looked at me like I had lost my Black mind and said, you don't get a chance to question us. I was like, no, you forget, I'm the judge. I get to question exactly who you are and what you're doing with these children. So you lost your mind. So in order to circumvent me, they go try to reestablish their dominance over me by running and telling some people that they think I have a boss for, telling them we're not going to send none of your kids to accept none of your kids into our facility anymore because we don't like being questioned. I said to them, you right. You ain't got to worry about that no way, because I ain't sending none of my Black babies in your direction no way. Mm-hmm. We have to create those things. Justice is a process of dismantling those things that dehumanize Black and brown bodies on a consistent, and there's no place to see it other than that you can see it more prevalent than see it in the eyes of these Black and brown babies. Man, I tell people all the time, like people ask me, like, why did you grow your hair? Now, I will be honest with you, this is not the normal look I normally had. But I started growing my hair to look like my young people. I was intentional in trying to look. They look like this. They look like this. We sponging. I'm in court sponging my hair because the same people that wanted to dehumanize them for their hair and their beard and the way they look, I wanted them to say, you still have to answer to this person in front of you and make sure that person in front of you is the same person that you're looking at. You're not going to dehumanize them because you have to listen to me. And as long as you listen to me, you will understand what force and power and Blackness look like. And I tell you, I ain't got no boss. You don't like it, go to law school and run against my Black behind. But until then, I'm going to make sure that I am in the process of dismantling injustices so that one day somebody, maybe my grandchild, will find peace. But until I get to that place, I am going to be in the verb business, not in the noun business.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hey, all y'all said was all people.
Come on, black man.
It was
Come on, black man.
It was.
Come on.
This is why it's important conversation what we're doing today, right? Because we had politicians on here today, black politicians. We had business people, and now we have you folks. And I'm telling you, there's a theme to what all of y'all are saying, and it's the beauty in hearing. It's the beauty of me being in the position I'm in. I'm like Switzerland in a lot of ways. I hear everything, right? I hear all sides. And I'm telling you, there's a theme between each area. Now, that might be different tactics, but there's a theme and passion. It's beautiful to hear. I hope people are paying attention to this. MJ, I'll let you ask the next question.
No doubt. Hey, so I've been monitoring some of the comments on social media, and there was a particular one that stood out that I think we can have a healthy conversation about. So someone asked, any aftermath of George Floyd's death, and when you think of this movement or protest, why is the narrative so focused on peace versus violence? And how does this kind of wording divide our community? And how do we reframe and take the narrative back? And I'm going to start it with M. Adams.
Thank you. We've seen this exact tactic be used against us. This is like the age-old fight between using Dr. King as the epitome of peace and using Malcolm X as the epitome of violence, and trying to say that Dr. King had the righteous method and way, and that if you did not follow his way, you were violent, and therefore anything that happened to you, you deserved. And just like we learned then that we have to reject that, and here's why we've got to reject it. Because they killed King anyway. They killed the person that they raised up as most people that they're raising up now as most peaceful and most beautiful. Right. The state still murdered him, right? The state still murdered him. So what we have to do as Black folks, and here's really the charge to us, what we have to do as Black folks is say we will not be divided on that line. We as Black folks have to say, what we're going to value here is the advancement of our community and not in the protection of white liberal order.
Yes.
We're going to measure if we're successful by what we are doing on this call if things change in the condition of Black people. Yeah. Not if white politicians feel good about how we went about change. That is what we need to measure, right? So when we interpret the rebellion on the street, what we should ask is, how did the Black youth feel at the end of that? Did they feel in their power? Victory. Were they out there protecting each other? Victory. We should not measure it by whether or not people liked the approach, right? And so that's the first thing that we have to understand is we cannot allow ourselves to divide on who's good or bad. I reject that every time, right? I am on the side of anybody who takes very seriously the freedom and liberation of our people.
Come on, Em.
I take that very seriously.
That's it.
Come on.
The other thing that we have to do is put the real blame on where it goes. People are protesting because Black people are being murdered by police. We have to always pivot back to that, right? Because we got people out there protesting that, but then we got a whole group of people coming to protest the protesters just because they don't like the way they protested. We cannot allow them to take up the narrative space. What we have to do is always come back. And this is why I think the hashtag or the mantra of Black Lives Matter is so important, because it states it clearly, right? We value all Black lives. We value Black women and girls, Black men and boys, Black LGBTQI people. And we value them, whether or not they were Eric Garner and possibly selling a cigarette. We don't care. We value him. And so I think it is our job as leadership, as leaders, to always point back to that. That is how we bring it back. When people come to us and ask us questions about, how does Target feel? I don't even answer that. What I talk about is George Floyd's scream for his mother, because Target did not scream for its mother. Pavement does not scream for its mother. So I think it is so important that we as leadership remind people the reason why we are out here is because our people are being murdered. and that we do not be divided on them trying to pit us.
Come on, man.
Powerful. Noble.
Yeah, I think she covered it very well. I mean, it was very, very well done. But I'll just add to that. I think it's an issue of messaging, and when you talk about the violent part of it, you're talking about what happened, the looting, the fires, the harm, the hurt. So if it focuses on the violence, it moves it away from the why. Why are we out here? What people are, then they stop asking the question of, justice, injustice, misconduct. They start asking the question as to why the protesters feel that the need to be out there and address their redress that's out there. So it's the messaging that counts. And what bothers me in the whole thing is they'll say protests, and then they'll combine people doing all of these activities. And so what gets muddled in the message is you'll think subconsciously, well, the protesters are burning. Well, the protesters are harming people. Well, the protesters are doing this. When in reality, the protesters are not doing it. Everybody knows what the protesters are out there for. So we miss the message. The protest is about why. The incidents and the impact, the adverse impact is about what. And the message gets lost if you focus on the what.
Powerful. Ajamou, your take from Milwaukee.
Family. Brother Noble, you just snapped so hard when you said let's be clear who is looting and rioting per se. And me and one of the activists here, we just had a little bit of disagreement, and I appreciate that my brother corrected me, because I was associating the protests with the unrest and with the looting and everything. He said, bro, he said, that's not us. He said, out of 1,000 people who out here with us, it might be 20 or 30 who want to tear something up and it's going to throw a brick through a window and so on and so forth. So he was telling me pretty much we got to begin to reshape the narrative of what the protesters is doing out here. See, you gotta realize how resilient of a people we are. Because let's think about it. We come from getting shot down with hoses and rubber bullets and German Shepherd dogs and, you understand, tear gas and all of these type of other things. But we still be out here on that front line, though. We still be out here on that front line. So it's up to us to open our mouth and tell our own story. One thing that I've been teaching and preaching lately in my social emotional workshops and trauma-informed care stuff that I've been doing is until the lion learns to tell his story, the hunter will always win the fight. Until the lion learns to tell his story, the hunter gonna always win that fight. So we in the season right now where the lion has said enough is enough. I'm not finna keep on letting that hunter dictate my story on how me and these other lions operate. So if that means we gotta roar, if that means us as lions gotta tear a hyena head off or tear a zebra head off his shoulder to get some understanding, I ain't mad at that. I think there's a delicate and a very thin line between peaceful protesting and just being ready to tear some shit up. Because as we all know, oppression hurts. Oppression hurts you more than a broken bone gonna hurt you. Being backed into a corner your whole life and dealing with systematic poverty and generational curses and racism and black on black this and blue on black and white on black, that put anybody in the position, man, they just gonna snap out. But see, again, when you talk about the resiliency of people of color, see, and I ain't trying to go there, but I'm gonna have to go there per se. You get us as a people, we've been dealing with people having their knee on our neck for 400, 500 years. You get somebody, a person of non-color, okay, they getting bullied in their high school, they shoot the whole damn high school up. So there's something in our people that knows how to rise above the toxicness, and we just want to get our voices heard, So I don't know, like I said, here in Milwaukee, it's been going on for I think this might be day 8. I think today is day 8 of civil unrest and protesting, and I hope if we got to take it to day 800. See, because when we did the Montgomery boycott, back when, that was done for hundreds of days. And look at the inconvenience the family then faced. They had to go to work. They had all type of stuff to do, but they was not going to support a system that did not support them. And that lasted for hundreds of days. I feel like almost a year, if I'm correct, with the Montgomery bus boycotts. And so I just simply say that, tear some shit up. However it may look, to some of us that may be on the streets in the streets on the front line. For some of us, we need to tear up generational curses in our family. Some of us need to tear up them demons that's in our closet that we've been hiding. Because, see, we can't get on the front line until we deal with the home line. So I don't know. I think I'm kind of all over the place in answering per se, but I hope that, brought a little bit of relevancy per se.
Yeah, no, it's powerful.
All right, Miss Jacquelyn Hunt. Miss Jackie. We can't hear you, Jackie.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just saying, I don't think that there's a whole lot more to be said. All the other responses have been spot on. So, yeah.
All right. Everett, you want to add anything? Should we move to the next question?
You're on mute, bro.
You're on mute.
Let me just say that the complexity of what we're facing is, like, many of us have tried to do the boardroom conversations. We've tried to have the one-on-ones. We try to go and do the speaking and talking and educating, hoping that that will lead to some significant changes in their behavior. But I don't know, you know, we did this for years, and it's just like there's always still the resistance because they don't have the power. If anything, what the protests do is it makes the people aware that they are not the most powerful, and what they symbolize as powerful can be broken. And when those symbols are broken, then they will pay attention. Man, as long as their symbols still exist, as long as their Macy's and the Targets and the other stuff exists, then they will always be like, oh, we will wait till they just get tired and then we're going to go back to buying Louis Vuitton. But when their symbols are broken, then they start to awaken to the reality that there is a different narrative that needs to happen. And I just think, given where we are today, man, listen, man, I mourn the idea that I believed that talking to people was going to make a difference. I mourn.
It's real.
I mourn it.
It's real.
I mourn all the energy, all the time. When I should have been invested in Black and brown bodies, I'm up there trying to convince my white liberals that maybe they should try to make some changes and use their power to see my people the way they wanted to, and they just didn't.
So I have actually, this question is from me, but I want y'all to answer this too. I'm gonna start with you, Jackie, but I'm gonna answer it. And it's sort of coming back with what you were saying, Ajamou, about the lion and the hunter, about who tells the story. So the question is, Mr. Sanders, being in the media, what role does the media have in advancing the cause for the African-American community? Not only reporting on the news, but making sure that the story gets told correctly and accurately. And I'll answer as best I can without trying to offend anyone, but I think what a lot of the white media does is they don't have relationships in our community. And so the reason we could put this summon on so quickly within 4 days is because I know all of y'all. I have relationships with you, right? So when you have relationship in the community, you can tell the perspective from their perspective. Like, look, there's stuff that happens I don't know about, that I don't agree with, but it's not my point to tell the story, right? So I have to put me down and let them tell the story first. And so from our perspective, we do something called community journalism. Means journalism usually tells you to be objective and not engage with the people you're writing on, right? We don't go by that. We say, no, we have to have relationships in the community to hear their authentic voice. And if we don't do that, we're not telling their story. We're trying to tell a story how we want to hear their story, right? So it's about relationships and letting them, like the people in the community who you're covering, let them tell their story. And I do think it's important, because one of you mentioned Miss Janelle earlier. It might have been you, M. Go back to the media at that point. When one of our media friends put Janelle's picture up there, they put a picture of her, like her mugshot of her. We, on the other hand, put her up in her prom dress on purpose to let people know that that was a baby that they put their hands on, right? Yeah. And that she was a human, that was a baby, not a mugshot, it was a baby. So we intentionally do that, right? Now, we get it wrong sometimes, but overall, that's our intent. And we look at things differently from the white media because we have relationships, right? But Jack, I'll let you answer that question too about the Black media and how the media covers us.
Okay. So, well, first of all, the bottom line is if it's white media is going to view us through a white media lens. They aren't able to look at us through a lens that appropriate and that really looks and depicts us in our true element. Everything is like I'll just take, for example, they always use the negative narrative to tell the story. And anytime I've like, even here in Madison, like anytime I've shared information or wanted, like was put in print, I've always asked, please allow me to see what you write, or please allow me to hear what you're going to say before, because I've been misquoted so many times. People have taken pieces of what I've said and strung it to something else and taken it out of context to create a whole different narrative than the story that was really trying to be told. So I think that the bottom line is the biggest part of it is the lens that they look through. They don't look at blacks through a black lens. So they're looking at it through the lens from where they come from. And that's the lens that sells papers or sells news or, buys ads or whatever it is. So they're not even looking at us and being able to authentically tell our story because of the relationships. They don't have those. And I don't know if they ever desire them, to be honest. Like, sometimes we are open to share. Other times, I know for me, I'm guarded. And I'm guarded because of experience and because I've seen how the media will one day praise your name and then tomorrow tear you down. And I always say I'm one somebody's getting mad at me from being on everybody's list because of something. Oh, I knew she was, just because I've openly shared my past, right? So you can't use that to hurt me. But I know that there's a lot of I knews waiting to happen, right? And the media will take something like that and run with it. So they can't see who we are because they're blinded by who they are.
Yeah. And I want to add one thing too. I'll come to you, Everett. One of it too is I feel like we're accountable to the community. So each of y'all on here, I guarantee, has called me, texted me, said something about nope, I don't like this and I like that. Why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? Every day I get that from our community out of love, right? Out of love. So we're accountable to the community and we respect that, right? That's part of it too. Yep. But go ahead, Everett.
Henry, I've told you on a number of occasions where I get frustrated with the mainstream media's preoccupation with the same cultural lenses that have always defined media. I mean, if you just think about the ways in which they will put, soon as my black kids steal something, they put all their stuff out there on the news to get, white folks afraid and to get them in fear. But a white boy who sexually assaults another young white woman, they won't put that nowhere in the paper because they have an invested interest in keeping us divided and afraid. That's why, I'm almost in tears just thinking about Umoja right now and the ways in which Umoja and Malele went around telling black narrative stories that were switching it and saying, no, we're actually doing something good and you need to focus on that. I don't know if M ever remembers this, but I'll never forget, I never had experience with media till when we were the Young, Gifted, and Black, and we were working hard and we were pushing hard for these changes. And I remember I was given the charge to invite the media to come, and we invited all the media outlets, and they said, all right, tell them our demands, explain what we're looking for, and let's do it. All of them showed up. We explained the demands. We went through what we were specifically concrete ways we were looking for. And when we got home that evening to try to assess whether or not they were going to tell the story, guess how many news outlets told the story? None. Not one. All they wanted to talk about was Brandy's statements about blood in the streets. That's all they wanted to talk about. Why did she say that? I'm like, God, what the? They wanted to, and they told me when I sat with the editorial board, they said, well, the reality is that if it bleeds, it leads. And we need to get the stories that get the most reaction and the most hits and the most. So we're looking for the most controversial, even if it's not true. Even if it's not true yet, they're willing to put that narrative out there. So, no, I think the ways in which, I've always said we have an obligation to resist even the ability to have people use us to fulfill their stories. So I would tell people, I don't want you to interview me. You can't interview me. No, I don't want to be interviewed. Nope. Because I only want to speak to those who I believe can tell the story in the way we need to. Until we resist that, we're gonna always be somebody else's pathway to their some award that they're gonna get on media or something like that in the future.
Let me say a quick timeout. We got about 20 minutes left. And Noble, before you come on, we're getting a ton of questions on social media. This is probably the most questions I've seen out of the 3 panelists. But there is one, and then Noble, you can go next, a question around community control over the police. That question came up at the last discussion that we had, and we didn't really spend a lot of time on it. So I'm hoping we can spend a little bit of time on that now. Go ahead and take it.
But Noble, you can go ahead, Noble, and answer the question back to the media, then we can move on.
I was just going to comment really quickly, and I'll go back to something that you said, Henry. I think it's important. It's all about relationships. And during this time when we lost a great woman in our community, we lost Malele.
Hey.
I think it's important to recognize the impact and the power that this woman had in terms of building relationships and seeing us in a positive way, carrying stories that were not carried before, going places that were not there in her way. Back in early 1991, I'm walking out of the mayor's office. I'm a police officer. The woman looked at me in my eyes and said, "You can be chief. You know that, don't you?" I never even thought of it until she said it. So the media is the way to realize what things can be. And it does have an impact. And I also want to just quickly pay some homage to Henry. Henry, in a short time, has done some things that are just amazing. I mean, the impact of Henry in terms of people listening to him, watching him, and that's not just the African-American community. Yeah. Henry is broad-based. He covers the state of Wisconsin, and I've been very impressed. I did want to just say that.
Appreciate that love.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Well done, Henry.
Quick.
Yeah.
If I could just say maybe 1 minute on the media really quick.
For sure.
Okay, so I'll make it really brief. So one, I do think that the media has been responsible for dividing Black movements. We've seen it historically in the 60s and we see it now. I think even right now, there's currently the State Journal is attacking me and my organization, right? Intentionally trying to galvanize what I'm calling anti-Black resistors. They're trying to paint us out as the people who are responsible for the issues with America. And so I think we should point to that. And I also think somebody's point about people lying in the media, right? The media has misrepresented our work several times. And I appreciate your point about Everett about Brandy, because in particular, I have seen the media really misrepresent Brandy's work and misrepresent Brandy's perspectives. And in general, I think they make her, they try to make her seem much more adversarial than what she is. And what I do know about Brandy is that her work has really been rooted in love. However, when they capture her in ways to be divisive. And so I do think as Black folks, I think us having relationships with each other is really where it matters. I do not think having a relationship with white media will necessarily change how white power structures tell our stories.
Oh, great point. All right.
Do you want to talk about the MJ aspect community? Why don't you let's start with?
Yeah, because we're getting a lot of questions about that one.
And MJ, when we switch to the community control of police, I mean, I'm looking on this Facebook Live. I mean, let's give some of these people specifics because they tuned in on criminal justice reform, and they need to understand that before you can get to reform, you got to be able to be patient with the analysis that Black folks give. And I can see that they're trying to show frustration. They want to get to answers, but they don't want to listen to pain. So just make sure that they understand we do have answers, but you need to listen to this pain as well.
Absolutely. All right, who wants to start, M, or who wants to take the community control of police? Noble?
Ajamou, so he wants to go first.
Want to take it?
I think that's a very delicate conversation, community control over the police. Because if you want to just be blunt and if you want to be real direct and forward, it's going to take physical control, it's going to take political control, and it's going to take financial control. I watched, a year or two ago right here in Milwaukee, they funded the police like it was no tomorrow, but they took money away from the school after school programs. They funded the police to get way more cop cars out here and way more bodies out here, but then they took money away from the free food programs that we have going on. You know what I'm saying? So it's like when you talk about community control over the police, that's why the voting conversation is very important and having a solid Black agenda. I don't want to just get out here and tell thousands of Black people to vote for somebody who's going to be more corrupt than the last individual who was in office. But I think especially when it comes to that relationship between the police and the community, who we vote in office, they got to concede to our demands. And we got to be the type to follow up with them demands, okay? If Brother Everett keep on slapping me in the back of my head and I say, hey, brother, stop hitting me in the back of my head or else we're going to have some problems. And he keeps slapping me in the back of my head, but I don't follow up with my or else, then he got every right to keep on slapping me on the top of my head. No matter how many times I ask him to stop or I try to tell him morally what he's doing is incorrect. See, when you're dealing with the police, and I ain't talking about everybody, I'm talking about a blanket statement, okay? When you're dealing with the police, you're dealing with a society or organization or a gang that don't have no moral compass. And we be trying to appeal to their moral sense and say, hey, that was wrong. Why did you do that? Hey, you shouldn't have shot that little boy down. You shouldn't have shot that sister down like that. We got to switch up our whole approach. You know what I'm saying? I ain't trying to sit here and promote on here to fight fire with fire because we ain't got enough fire to fight that type of fire. But I'm saying maybe that needs to be an element. We need to figure out political voting blocks. We need to figure out economic strengthening ways to pull our dollars together and say, hey, we back politicians and we back police chiefs and we back sheriffs who really support the people. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. It's a touchy conversation because me personally, I ain't never really had no good relationship with police officers. I can remember as young as being like, I don't know, maybe 9, 10, 11 years old. And my father, one of his friends, one of my dad's friends asked him, like, what you want to be?
Did we lose him?
When you grow up, you know, all little boys have at some point in life, they want to be a police officer. They're thinking about saving people, carrying a gun and fighting the bad guys. And so I was excited about that. Man, my daddy sat me down that evening. He said, don't even let me hear you say that again. He said, because when you become a young man in this world, you and police gonna have a whole different relationship. Mm-hmm. Now, on the flip side, I do got one of my brothers, like my big brother, Donnie. He worked for the sheriff department. And Donnie's solid. Donnie, a real Black man. Donnie don't put on that blue uniform and then he gotta, bend to the demands of his boss. And he still is very vocal when it comes to racial issues and very vocal when it comes to social justice issues. So I think we need to put more of our people on the police force, who really come from where we come from, who have our best interest at heart, who understand that the real role of the police is to protect and serve people and not just property, how the sister was talking about earlier, where they're going to protect the concrete versus the homeless man who going through this, that, and the third. So I don't know, again, a lot of these topics, I be having like multiple perspectives, and I wish I could kind of root myself in a solid perspective to say, I think we should do this, or I think this could be the solution to the pollution. But just all that I've seen as a Black man, it's hard for me to say it's going to be any successful relationships here in Milwaukee. At least Milwaukee is hyper segregated. Milwaukee is over policed. Milwaukee is underfunded. Milwaukee is undereducated. Milwaukee is under resourced. And then when you add a racist military police force on top of that, I don't know what them community relationships look like. The police here in Milwaukee, they'll tell you straight up like I can't tell you how many times I've been stopped. I ain't even finna go into my personal stories. I don't know who all we got on the line, so I can't talk about them. People run-ins, if you will. I'm just saying, I've been jammed up before. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, you preaching.
Handle us be just straight animalistic.
No doubt. Okay, you mind if I think that I really would love to hear from your perspective because when we see the movement that you've created here in Madison. A lot of times people hear in the chants community control over police. Can you just explain to us in the community? I mean, there's probably 600 or 700 people online. Tell us, like, what's your definition of Freedom Inc.'s ideal community control over police?
Thank you, Michael.
So we fight for community control over the police because it is our assessment that the fundamental reason why there's continued violence against the Black community with the police is because the Black community as a whole, not a couple rich people who might be able to slide or skate through, but the Black community as a whole does not have the power to hold the police accountable, right? And so I want to be really clear what I'm talking about when I say power. Power is not transparency. Knowing what happened is not the same thing as being able to do something about what happened, right? The Black community, we've always known about it, whether or not there's been video. So this isn't about just giving us more information on who's been killed, how many of us arrested, and who did it. We already know, right, in some form or another. But this is really about Black communities having the ability to determine what safety is for us. That is at the crux of what community control is. Now, the reason why we're fighting for community control, right? We're not fighting for influence. We're not fighting for say. We are fighting for control over policing because we're fighting for the ability to determine the hiring and firing. We don't want to ask anybody if Matt Kinney should have a job. I don't want to ask, why should I have had to go to Chief Koval and say, can you please fire? I don't even want to talk to you. You killed Tony. We all know you killed Tony. We all know you shouldn't have killed Tony. You're out of here. That's community control. Secondly, we want to determine the policies, practices, and the procedures. This is so important, right? Because as Ajamou just pointed out, we want to be able to determine what happens if somebody is outside urinating on the concrete. We want to be able to say, what is the societal contract? Because that's what police are doing, is police are carrying out the societal contracts. And right now, those contracts are rooted in protecting property and wealth for white capitalist elite. We want to determine the contracts of engagement, right? So that does mean a bunch of stuff is going to get decriminalized. As I mentioned, we're not fighting for the ability to lock Black people up in cages because a 17-year-old was outside smoking weed. We ain't on that, right? That's part of our policy change. We're not doing that, right? And also with this, and this is why I think people have to understand what we're saying isn't that we're going to maintain policing systems as we know it. It will radically change how we understand policing. And so in many ways, it will abolish our current iteration of policing. It will, right? We will instead invest in things that transform society. Instead, invest in non-punitive, because policing is punitive. They show up to sanction. They show up to murder. They show up to cage or put you in jail. That's what we don't want that. We want the budget that policing gets. So those billions of dollars in the nation spent on militarization of policing, we want those resources to determine what safety looks like. And that is what the crux is of community control.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Powerful, and I wanted to make sure that people, heard that perspective. And I would say too, there's a lot of media. A majority of our media outlets are paying attention. I would ask that you report that as she has communicated. Noble Wray, you were the former police chief for Madison, and given what M just shared, is that something that you believe in, that the community should have control over the police?
First of all, the community has had control over the police. The question is, which community? Policing has been rooted, the modern day policing has been rooted since 1800. And the saying by Robert Peel is the police are the community are the police. But as a police chief and working with police chiefs across the United States, I have learned that the police are the community and the community are the taxpayers with money because they have the most influence. And I'm just being realistic. There are people, and I know, and I appreciate M. Adams laying that out, because this is the first time I've heard specifically articulated, what is meant by that. Community control. There are communities within communities. So I struggle. I honestly do. As being a police chief, I struggle with how something like that would be implemented, because everyone has their own needs, desires. As chief of police, I had communities that I went back and forth, and you try and work with, and you try and determine their needs, and you try and determine that. But the dominant community, I must say, because when I wanted police officers, I knew where to go. I knew how to push buttons. When I wanted a particular policy change, I knew where to push buttons. There were times, I'm just being frank and honest, when myself as a chief of police would say, hey, look, there is an issue here in the Black community. We need to address that. But then when it came down to making those key decisions, the decisions that are made at the Police and Fire Commission, changes in policies and procedures, who decides the budget, who decides how many cars I get, who decides how many officers I get. It really was not the African-American community. I'm just being straight. I have been sitting at council meetings in the city of Madison since the late 80s. And the reality is that I did not go to the Black community to deal with issues that mattered to the department from a substantial standpoint. Now, we pushed outreach to listen to the African Americans. So policing started with just one community in mind. There's no question about that. Community policing evolved. It was this idea that there are more communities and that we needed to do outreach. That was really community policing. Community policing's roots were developed and based in the African American community, saying, hey, we're here, folks. If you want to police, you've got to address our issues. Now, the question is have we done that in the last 30 years since the advent of community policing? In some instances, we've made some progress, but we are way behind. And if any chief of police in America steps up and says to you, for the most part, that they are policing based upon the needs of the African-American community, I'm talking about the overlay. You may work in a certain neighborhood, you may work in a certain district. They're not telling the truth. They're really not. I advocated, I talked about trust, I talked about the importance of outreach, I talked about the importance of making relationships, and that is true, and that is important. But when the rubber meets the road, when it's time to do some of the key things and who decides what and where things go, and are you going to let this person go? It really does come down to the people that are in power, influence. And as they said, as Robert Peel said, the police are the community are the people. No, the police are the community are the taxpayers and people that have power and influence. That's still a reality in America.
I'm gonna try to ask a question from a different perspective. So for our white viewers right now, and Master Try, we have a really big white audience who read our stuff, but I'm getting texts from our white friends right now asking these questions, right? Okay. You guys want to let people go from jail, all people go from jail. You want to, so if a homeless person is peeing on the cement, what are you going to do? So are you saying people's property is not important? If you're an owner of property, it's not important. So we have our white folks out there hearing this, and they benefit from some of the stuff you guys are advocating against. What would you say to that? What would you say to someone that says, wait a minute, you guys want to community police, you want to take over, right? I'm gonna start with you, Everett, because you want to let people out of jail, everyone out of jail. You want to also saying that someone's peeing on my sidewalk or my building, you're saying there's nothing that should happen to them. These are questions that white folks have. And so how would you answer these questions? I'll start with you, Everett. I know, Em, you want to answer too, but I'll start with you, Everett. How would you answer that question?
That just underscores that they are not listening. Mm-hmm. They're not hearing the depth of explanation that Em and all of us are trying to communicate. It is not, we're saying put value on the human being and not value on whatever it is, your property. It is about understanding what these cages are doing to people and what the impact that they do. I'm just going to say this, and I have my own issues, but I remember going to Lincoln Hills for the first time after I got elected. And I told this story for this reason. And I went to Lincoln Hills and I said, as a judge, I want to know where is your solitary confinement? I remember the administrator told me at the time, we don't have solitary confinement. We call it restrictive housing. I said, I don't care what you call it. What do you keep Black kids for 23 out of 24 hours a day? And they showed me this space, and they had been locking up Black and brown boys, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old in a cage, not medicating them, not getting them access to an attorney, not talking to their parents, not being able to give them due process. And if I had not asked a question, they would have let them boys sit in there and not be able to get the help they need. I had to go from Madison, Wisconsin to that place and begin to put them on blast before they be able to get them boys some damn help. And you say, why we passionate about these issues is because let them out of the cages. Because you are trying to use that to dehumanize them because you don't see them as with enough value to understand what they need, that you rather cage them than treat them like, yes, let them out. It is about that. That's how insulting our Department of Social Workers treat me. They call me Judge Let Them Out because I refuse to just hold Black kids in institutions where they don't need to be when they could be at home with their families figuring out their destiny.
Em, how would you answer that question? We got a couple, 3 minutes here, Em, so I'll let you answer that question too. Because, I get that question. I'm telling you, my phone is blowing up from our people they're trying to learn. Let's just be compassionate. People are trying to learn.
So one, I'll just say really quickly, I think people think of law and policing and prisons as these objective social rules, right? But we know that that's not true. If a poor person pees outside on State Street, they go to jail. If a rich person does it, what happens to them? That's actually the question that the property owner or whoever is asking you should think about. Nothing happens to rich people who do these things. So that tells me who's policed, who goes to jail, and who sits in a cage has everything to do with class. And if it has everything to do with poverty, you best believe it has everything to do with race, right? And that is the difference between State Street, Oktoberfest or whatever it's called, the Halloween thing, where there's 100,000 white kids out there acting a fool, pissing everywhere, spray painting, mask on, fighting. I even seen them tussling with the police. None of those kids go to jail for police violence. None of those kids go to jail for attacking the police. Nobody gets a felony. None of those white kids have left that night as felons, right? Because the system does not interact with them in that way. So this is what I want people to understand who are so worried about order and property. This system does not evenly or equally apply these rules. So we have to reject this system, right? We cannot have these jails functioning as poor houses. If the majority of people are sitting in a jail because they can't afford to get out, that's about money. That's not about what actually happened, right? We have so many people sitting in cages right now for pretrial detention, which means they have not even been convicted of anything. We just have people sitting there simply because they cannot pay. Two, like Everett said, we are about the investment being in the people. If I see a homeless person peeing and I had the resources of the state, I would house that person. That's what I would do. I would not buy a tank. I would not build a cage. I would not pay people to walk around with guns who have the power to kill people. I instead would build a lot of housing. That's how I would solve homelessness. How I would solve people having mental health issues, I would create schools where people could go and be psychologists. I would properly pay social workers and frontline community workers. I would pay and I would make sure that people had access to health care without having to pay. I would invest in the people and not in the cement.
Powerful, powerful. Ajamou, Everett, Jacquelyn, Noble, M, powerful, powerful stuff. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We've run out of time, but at 2:00 today, I hope you all come back. The education, reform, and justice conversation is going to take place. And we have a very, very powerful panel, including Madison College President, Dr. Jack E. Daniels, UW Professor Emeritus, Dr. Gloria Latson-Billings, One City Schools founder and CEO, Colleen Kerr, Madam founder and executive director, Weenie Karanja, and then UW Milwaukee Vice Chancellor, Dr. Joanne Prince. Guys, thank you. Thank you for everything that you do in our community. And I just want to let you know, this is very, very powerful personally. and we appreciate you and nothing but love.
Thank you for coming, Everett. M, thank you for coming. Thanks for coming, Noah. Thank you, Miss Jackie. Thank you for coming.
All right, much love, y'all.
See you, King. See you, King.